Good afternoon and welcome to Brunel University London's Psychological Sciences Conversion MSc online presentation and Q&A. During the next hour there will be two presentations, one from Dr. Stanley Gaines, who will be talking about the course, and one from Lauren Wigmore, who will be talking about her experience as a student here. At the end of their two presentations there will be an opportunity to ask questions. To do this, you should type your question into the panel in front of you and click Submit. You may need to open up your question bar at the right-hand side of your screen. I now have pleasure in introducing Dr. Stanley Gaines.
Okay, thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm just going to go through the presentation. Regarding the MSc Psychological Sciences Conversion course, it's designed for students who have not received a bachelor degree from a psychology program that's been accredited by the British Psychological Society, or BPS. I want to make 2 points. One is we would be expecting that students have some sort of bachelor's degree or the equivalent, just not from a BPS accredited psychology program. Also, we would expect that students not have more than 60 BPS accredited credits, even without a degree. But in general, we're looking for students who are looking to retrain, basically, from other disciplines into psychology. In terms of what we offer, it is a BPS accredited program, and upon successful completion, students have the graduate basis for chartered membership, or GBC. In terms of what we cover, every area that the BPS require that we cover, biological, cognitive, developmental, individual differences, social, also history of psychology, along with methodology, statistics, and research methods, and the 60-credit dissertation are all offered in this conversion course. In terms of part-time versus full-time options, one can enroll for 1 year or for 2 years part-time. Both options are fully BPS accredited, and both options culminate in a 60-credit dissertation. And in terms of more details, I've listed the website. You may or may not have had a look at it already, but here it is again. And in closing, we hope that we see you in September 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. Lauren, please go ahead and tell us about life here as a student at Brunel University London.
Thank you. Hello. So my name's Lauren, and I'm going to give you a bit of information about student life. So this is me. I initially completed my undergraduate at a drama school, and I spent the last 10 years in pursuit of an acting career and working in temp jobs. And I basically got to a point where I felt that it was time to reassess my career path. And so based on all of my past experience and my general areas of interest, it led me to the decision to complete a master's in psychology. Because my undergraduate wasn't in a directly related area, I needed to make sure this was a conversion course. But I also needed to make sure it was part-time because I work full-time. So this means that it's going to take me 2 years to complete. However, for me, I find this much more manageable in terms of structuring of learning and what have you. And I also find that being a mature student has been extremely beneficial due to simply the accumulation of life experience. So aside from studying and working, a few other things about me. I love coffee, which is obviously a requirement of being a student. I enjoy backpacking, traveling, fitness, and seeing friends. I realise all of this makes me sound a bit like I'm on a dating app, but I list them because I think they're also really important aspects to keep in mind in terms of health, like mental and physical health. And they also help keep you switched on in a way that I think can aid my study and help you manage stress, which you will feel as a student. So yes, I did say stress. The reasons, however, though, that I went back to studying is quite simple. I basically needed more mental stimulation than I was getting. I also felt that it was time to orchestrate a career change and really be able to sink my teeth into something that I could really achieve something in. I've naturally always had an interest in people and areas of psychology, and I'd already done an A-level in psychology, but I also wanted to utilise my acting experience as well, as I felt that that also provided a really relevant base. So why I chose the MSc at Brunel, and there's probably three key reasons that I chose this course. One, as Stanley mentioned, is that it is a conversion course. Two, it's accredited by the BPS. And thirdly, the subject areas it covers meant I could really figure out what areas of psychology would be the right fit for me. So at master's level, there's also a real sense of independent learning. And I found this aspect that I really enjoy because it means that I have some freedom to shape my study into what naturally interests me or that I feel will be beneficial to my goals. Oh, sorry, I think I jumped. Oh, so Brunel I think is really great because it's on the outskirts of London, which means commuting is really handy in relation to work, gaining volunteering practice and managing a social life. But also because it's a campus-based university, it's quite rare for a city university, so once you're here, everything that you need is around you. I also found the lecturers extremely helpful when I was initially inquiring into the course, and having been studying for a year, it's great to be taught by individuals who are genuinely passionate about their subject matter, and they're very open to helping you learn and develop. Within Brunel, there's also a dedicated postgraduate centre and team, and that also was a key selling point for me. So there's an exclusive independent postgraduate area in the library as well, which I found extremely useful. And both the postgraduate building and the area in the library are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for postgraduate students only. Other aspects that might be of interest to you is things like Brunel volunteers and a really helpful careers advice team. So after the course, I'm currently undecided as to the exact direction that I want to venture in, but there are a wealth of options available, which I find really exciting. The part-time study allows me to figure out which way I want to shape my career, and also to learn more about the areas that I enjoy and excel in, but also with my weaker areas and ones that I can really improve and challenge myself on.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren, for sharing this with us. There's certainly enough coffee shops on campus to keep you going, aren't there? Okay, well, I'd like to now open this up for questions. So you're welcome to put your questions forward to either, if you've got a question for Dr. Stanley Gaines, or to Lauren. Okay, thank you. Well, we have our first question through. Emily is clearly interested in studying this as a part-time course, and she would like to know how many teaching hours per week on the part-time course.
Okay, for part-time, we're talking about roughly 6 hours of in-class time per week. That's as opposed to roughly 12 hours a week for the full-time course. So it's the same content, but for part-time it's spread obviously over 2 years.
Thank you, Emily. I hope that answers your question. How do you find the workload? Because you're part-time, aren't you, Lauren? How do you find the workload?
Yeah, it is manageable, but you do just need to have good time management to be able to structure it and obviously be dedicated to what you're doing. But it's also important, I found, to remember to rest, because I think a lot of people think if you just keep going, you'll sort of do better, but actually having that rest period and giving your brain a break from work and study is actually really beneficial to make progress. So I think that's something important to remember.
Thanks, Lauren. Sounds like good advice. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, we have another question through. Thank you, Jane Louise. So this is about the research project, and Jane Louise would like to know a little bit more about the research projects.
Yes, the idea is that you would cap off your experience as a psychology student by taking on an independent research project, which we call the dissertation. And it would be done in consultation with a staff member who would act as supervisor. You will have learned by the time you take on the dissertation various research methods, both quantitative involving number crunching and more qualitative that are more narrative interpretation based. Also, we do cover statistics along the way. In terms of the raw materials for doing research, not only would you have that, but as Lauren alluded, we give you exposure to various major content areas, and many, if not most, of our students choose one of those areas for a specialty. And part of the idea is that you might have some initial questions. Has anybody done research on this area or that? You'd be surprised at how much is wide open in this field. Part of the excitement, part of what could be maddening also, but part of the excitement of being in psychology is that there are so many questions that have yet to be answered. Although we are a science, many fellow sciences perhaps feel that they've answered a lot of the most fundamental questions, whereas for psychology, I suspect that I will have retired and still not have scratched the surface. So there are all sorts of questions that are out there to be answered, and part of the idea is finding out what areas have been researched, and by implication, what gaps remain. And that's where the supervisors come in, helping to steer the students toward areas that are ripe for study, but just for whatever reason haven't been tackled yet. So in a nutshell, that's what the dissertation is all about. It is an independent research project. Usually that involves collecting new data, though not necessarily. I've known about dissertations where students have reanalyzed pre-existing narrative data, for example, or maybe reanalyzed quantitative data. But probably in most instances, students are collecting their own data and then making sense of that data, whether through quantitative or qualitative analyses.
Thank you very much. Naomi is asking if you could possibly talk a little bit more about the modules and how they are assessed.
Yes. Well, one of the great joys about this program is that we have a variety of assessment methods. What I could do is talk you through what you would expect, say, for the part-time program for the first and second years. And Lauren can correct me if I've gotten something wrong along the way. I'll do my best. For term one of the first year, I convene conceptual and historical issues in psychology. The code for the postgraduates is PY 5602. It's covering the history of psychology, and we learn that there is a lot of philosophy that goes into psychology. We have one assessment. It's a 2,000-word essay where the student chooses from one of two possible questions, each question typically asking about four major perspectives, theories basically, within philosophy or more recently, modern-day psychology. Now I should also add that for that specific module, we also have a formative essay. So about midway through the term, students have a chance to basically have a trial run at coursework. It's a bit shorter, it's 1,500 words. And it doesn't necessarily need to feed into the final paper, but that's one way that some students have used that formative essay. And to be honest, it's possibly the first essay that you will have written as a psychology student. So it's meant to give you practice not only for this module, but for writing essays in psychology more generally. Now, that module takes up 20 of the 30 credits that you would have in the part-time program. The other 10 credits for part-time in term one, year one, is statistics. I have to remind myself of the code number at the postgraduate level, PY 5606. It's meant to cover fundamentals in statistics. In practice, we have called on the resources of academic skills, or ASK, to supplement much of what we do in that module. But basically, students are learning how to do quantitative analyses of data. So those are some basics that you'd get for term one of year one. For term two of year one, we have a combination, biological and cognitive psychology. 2/3 of that time is devoted to biological psychology. Oh, I should back up. You asked about assessment. For statistics PY 5606, Lauren, again, can remind me if I'm wrong. I believe there are two.
No, for statistics,
there's one assessment?
It's just one final assessment. Right. Yeah, for this time around it was sort of 3 questions each with various parts that we would have to analyse the data and represent it as a report.
Right. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Once I get outside my own modules, the thinking gets slightly fuzzy. With term 2 of year 1 for biological and cognitive, there are 3 assessments. There's an oral presentation that's cognitively orientated, that counts for 15% of the grade. There is an exam that's shared between biological and cognitive that accounts for 55% of the grade.
30.
Oh, the 30, sorry.
30 for the exam and 55 for the essay.
For the essay. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah. So the other portion is strictly for biological, the coursework. So notice for that group, which we actually refer to as an assessment block, because it's divided into the lecture component and the assessment component, we have 3 assessments: oral presentation, exam, coursework. The other 10 credits, can you remind me what the other, I'm having to remind myself for this. I tell you what, let me just turn developmental, I believe.
So yeah, developmental, individual and social, we don't do until the 2nd year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I have to remind myself. It's 30 credits for biological and cognitive. That's right. 20 of those 30 credits basically go toward biological, 10 toward cognitive. I do. Yeah, this is right. Okay. Into year 2, term 1, we have, let's see, research methods, and that's all the 30 credits. There is a study block component, which is lectures. There is an assessment component also feeding into that. Technically, what you get credit for on your transcript is the assessment block, as is the case with biological and cognitive psychology for year 1. And there I believe that they have a quantitative assessment. There are 3 assessments total. 1 that's quantitative, actually I think 2 quantitative, 1 qualitative. I believe that's right. Multiple assessments, they're all coursework. Then for term 2, year 2, we have developmental, PY 5605, individual differences, PY 5604, social, PY 5605. For developmental, there is coursework, 1,500 words,
about 15,
coursework essay. For individual differences, we have 2 assessments, oral presentation that counts 30% of the grade, and coursework that accounts for the remaining 70%. And for social, I believe that there are 2 assessments. They're both coursework. I believe they're 50 in terms of weighting.
I think there's only 1 for social. I think it was 100% last time.
Oh, okay. I have to remind myself of what the undergraduates. The other thing the reason that I'm having a bit of difficulty is that we share nearly all of these modules with undergraduates. So I'm thinking, okay, for the undergraduate, and sometimes divided between level 2 and level 3. So we have different sets of assessments for level 2 versus level 3 versus the master students. So I do apologize for that. Finally, for the final term of the final year is the dissertation, and that's the remaining 60 credits. So notice you'll have 120 taught credits and then 60 purely research project credits.
Okay, thank you very much. That certainly seems to give quite a detailed insight into the different types of assessments. I have another question through. What is the end date of the programme for the full-time MSc?
Right. For both full-time and part-time students, the end date basically is the handing in date for the dissertation. That's typically the middle of September. It's just before the start of the next academic year. So that would be the end date. So for full-time students this year, I believe it's the 15th of September. It's usually mid-September, and that's the case for part-time students as well. In fact, basically the university-wide turn-in date for dissertations typically is mid-September, with a few exceptions for specific programs, but we don't operate under those exceptions within this program.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, another question through. Which days are the lectures usually on?
Well, in practice, it's usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We don't allocate specific days for this program. It's partly because we are coordinating most, but not all, of the classes with the undergraduate versions of these modules. It so happens that most of those modules land on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So typically you're looking at 2 or 3 days a week, not so much Mondays, not so much Fridays. They aren't out of the question for individual one-off sessions, but generally our classes are on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. One extra point that I should make is that although we share regular lecture time between the undergraduate and postgraduate versions of the modules, we also have MSc-only seminars along the way, adding perhaps 2 to 4 hours of class time over the term for a given module.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is, how big do the classes tend to be?
Well, there is the MSc component, and I've also referred to the sharing of resources with the undergraduates. This year we have our first full cohort with this program, 17 master students. They are sharing space with roughly 150 undergraduates at a given time. But I must say, it's been a real joy having the MSc students in the class, because although they are smaller in number, they more than make up for that with the quality of insight, questions. So they definitely are active contributors overall to the classes. So I think that the bar has been raised for everybody as a result of having the MSc component to these classes.
Thank you. Another question through. Could you just clarify again for this person, the part-time students, when the hand-in month is for the dissertation?
It's the same for part-time and full-time students for this program. It would be middle September typically.
Thank you. The next question is, how many modules are compulsory and how many are self-elected?
All compulsory. None are elected. The reason is that we are heavier in the combination of statistics and research methods than most other programs across the UK. So for other programs, you may well find 1 or 2 optional modules. Rather than have options, we devote a lot of time to stats and research methods. So that's the short answer. It's all compulsory.
I just want to say on that I think if you have sort of certain areas of interest, you can shape some of your coursework or your oral presentations. There is a degree of freedom to kind of look at research papers that might underpin a specific area of interest, and then potentially work to shape that more accordingly. And obviously there's certain points you need to hit, but there is areas of freedom that you can actually sort of think outside the box, and I think that would definitely be something that would be promoted at a master's level. So is that independence of thought and really getting your own voice within each module and understanding it from a perspective that is actually going to help you as well as just get the points, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you. And I'll just add to that, if you want to know the exact modules, you can actually go onto the website and find the names of the modules on there. Okay, the next question is, how long has the MSc been running?
This is its 2nd year, and it's the first year with a full cohort. It's a relatively new program. It was several years in the making, but it's really taken off this year. It's been a real success story. So I'm proud of the program and proud of our students. So that's the short story. This is the first full-fledged cohort that we've had, and so far it's been a winner.
Thank you. The next question is, how many modules are there in total?
Well, you'll notice what I listed. We're talking about 2 to 3 modules for part-time students. Well, it could be anywhere from 1 to 3, to be honest. And you'd simply double that number for full-time students.
Yeah, I think it's 8 modules and 9 if you include the dissertation. I think it works out to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you were full-time, you'd have 3 modules in theory, even though the assessment blocks might be divided, and then in the second term you would have 5 modules, and then but some of the assessment blocks are combined, so that could be represented as 4, and then you'd have the dissertation. So I think that's probably where the confusion sits, is the combining of the assessment blocks as opposed to the actual modules of content.
It is a bit confusing. We were encouraged to not only package content differently at the MSc versus undergrad level, we were encouraged to integrate material at the MSc level in a way that we don't do for the undergraduates. So the undergraduates don't get a combined biological and cognitive experience. They don't get a combined statistics and research methods experience, whereas we provide that for the MSc students. The other thing I'll note is that in one of the early slides I mentioned all of the content areas that are covered. That will give you a sense as to how many total areas we're covering, then adding to that the dissertation.
Thank you. The next question, are there any group assessments, and if so, are they marked individually or are they marked as a group?
Let's see. There is one, for cognitive, there is a, Lauren, you could probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah.
Sure.
So in cognitive, in the oral presentation, that is a group presentation, and that is marked as a group. So yeah, it's all the teamwork, working together, selecting the research paper, presenting that back, and contributing your own voice to it. None of us found any problems with it being marked as a group because we were all very willing to work together and work towards the same point. So it wasn't problematic, and from my understanding, nobody had any issue with it being marked as a group as opposed to individually. So it hasn't encountered any major problems with that.
Mm. You know, that's a good point. So we have the group-based work in cognitive. In individual differences, which I convene, we have individual presentations, but they were all based on content that we've covered between that module and conceptual historical issues. So you get the experience of working individually and preparing presentations. Also, as Lauren indicated, you get experience working as a group and doing that same sort of task.
Thank you. We have another question through. Is counselling psychology covered in the MSc?
Regrettably, it isn't. We do cover clinical in our undergraduate program, but not at the MSc level. But that having been said, we do have a clinical psychologist, Terry Dovey, who is able and willing to work with students on the dissertations. So probably where students would get clinical and or counseling background would be with the dissertation on this program. Let's see, we also have Martina Reynolds, who specializes in qualitative methods and has a background in counseling. Also, Danny Novus, who is a psychoanalyst by training, is joining us, rejoining us from, this actually, he started this term. So the way that you would get clinical or counseling content would be through the dissertation, typically.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, that seems to be everything. Okay, well, thank you for attending our Psychological Sciences Conversion MSc online presentation. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and we hope that we will be seeing you at Brunel in September. That's now the end of our online presentation, but a recorded version will be available on the Brunel website shortly. Goodbye, and thank you for attending.